She's a wife, she's a mom, she worked in a school with kids. She had a lot of titles, but now we can say that she is a sexual predator. Alyson Cranick is admitting in court that she sexually coerced an 11-year-old boy. A boy she says once dated her daughter, and a boy who allegedly went to the school that she once worked at. We have the shocking messages of how this predator allegedly tried to use gifts to get this boy to follow her plan, and when he didn't want to meet with her anymore, she allegedly waged what could only be described as emotional warfare on a preteen to try to force him to meet her to allegedly be sexually assaulted again. We're on the case presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Hey guys, real quick, before we get into this case, let's talk about a big partner and sponsor of On the Case, Morgan & Morgan, America's largest personal injury law firm, a firm with more than 1,000 attorneys who have recovered $25 billion for more than 500,000 clients. And in the past few months alone, a client in Florida received $12 million when insurance offered just $350,000. In Pennsylvania, another client was awarded $26 million. That is 40 times the insurer's offer. Morgan & Morgan makes it easy to fight for what you deserve. You can even start a claim from your phone. So if you're hurt, you can start a claim at forthepeople.com/OTC. You can click the link below or scan the QR code on our screen. You just never know who someone really is. It's a saying that's cliche. It may sound dramatic, but there is truth to it. And this story that we're following out of Connecticut today that just took a major turn involving a woman who used to work at a school and a young boy is proof of that. Now, this is the woman I'm talking about, Alyson Cranick. She is now 44 years old, and she lived in Columbia, Connecticut. It's a quiet town east of Hartford. Now, Cranick on the surface is the kind of person that you would expect would live a regular life in a tiny town in Connecticut. She was a mom, she was married, and she worked at a nearby school district. She was an administrative assistant for the public schools. So she wasn't a teacher, but she was around young people every single day at work. Now, she might have looked normal on the surface, but that is not who this woman is. Let's start with her arrest on November 14th, 2024. And by the time Cranick was taken into custody, the damage was allegedly already done and had been done for years. Cranick is facing charges for allegedly sexually abusing the ex-boyfriend of her own young daughter, a boy who was just 11 when the alleged sexual abuse started. And shockingly, prosecutors say it started after the boy broke up with Cranick's daughter, and Cranick allegedly wanted to speak privately with this 11-year-old about the breakup. Now, according to court documents, the victim told police that, quote, Cranick had raped him. He explained that over the summer of 2022, he would sneak out of the house and meet this woman who is in her 40s. Now, the victim we're talking about, again, was just 11 when all of this started, according to prosecutors. Now, the victim said he communicated with Cranick on the platform Discord. That is often used by young people who play video games. The two of them shared 4,700 messages, according to court documents. And prosecutors say that Cranick would get the boy to sneak out of his house to meet with her in the middle of the night. Quote, one instance in which Cranick drove minor victim to a spot near the Salmon River where she kissed him, pulled his pants down, and sexually assaulted him. Now, the boy's mom allegedly had pictures of the chats between her son and Cranick, which likely were very critical pieces of evidence in this case. Documents say that Cranick would have the victim sneak out of his house at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Cranick would buy him Mountain Dew and Monster energy drinks just to keep him awake. This is an 11-year-old in the middle of the night going to meet this woman in her 40s. Cranick would allegedly park down the road from the boy's house and wait for him to leave undetected. Prosecutors said that Cranick took the boy to places like his school, a park, or a location near a lake where they would allegedly kiss, and she would allegedly sexually assault him. Now, after months and multiple sexual encounters with this 44-year-old woman, prosecutors write that the boy realized that it was too much, and he tried to stop seeing Cranick. He realized that what was happening was not normal and it was not okay. The boy even blamed a foot injury that he got in soccer to try and get away from her, but you'll see in the messages I'll show you in just a moment, she just kept coming at him. Now, Cranick also appeared to do all of this very much out in the open. Lifeguards at a lake allegedly spotted the boy fishing with Cranick, and the lifeguards, according to court documents, allegedly saw Cranick with her hand on the inside of this boy's leg, and the guards ended up telling the boy's dad, and Cranick responded to that saying that the lifeguards were just overreacting and the lifeguards hated her. Now, Cranick also offered to buy the boy an airsoft gun, and when he didn't want that gun because he wouldn't be able to allegedly explain to his parents how he got an airsoft gun, she just gave him between $300 and $500 in cash, according to these court documents. Now, one of the major sources of evidence in this case is the thousands of messages that Cranick and this boy sent each other on Discord. And not only did authorities link the boy to leaving his house to meet up with Cranick at least 14 times, there were also messages that she sent him like, quote, "You better sneak me upstairs to see your room. Tell her I want to see your LEDs or something. You can tell her I'm putting them up, but want to see placement or something." This isn't talking about what the minor would tell his mom if he brought Cranick into his home. Now, Cranick also talked to the boy on Snapchat, and the boy's mom had taken his Snapchat away, but Cranick wrote, quote, "You should say that's how all your friends communicate and that they really don't text, so it would be nice to be able to talk to them on there." She also said she, quote, "missed his pics." Now, on July 20th, 2023, Cranick allegedly sent the boy a message suggesting that she could shower with him. But then, even more shocking, this 44-year-old woman on July 21st, 2022, allegedly told the minor that she wanted to make him a beaded bracelet with the acronym BFFWB. Now, that stands for Best Friends Forever with Benefits. Cranick then said that she actually couldn't put that on a bracelet because of how incriminating it would look, and that she wanted to make an acronym only for them. Prosecutors say that she landed on BFFFLWB, and that stands for Best Friends Forever for Life with Benefits. She then sent the boy the bracelet and told him to tell people that it meant best friends for life were better. Now, not only do these messages show that Cranick was allegedly grooming this child and preying on this child, but there are several messages that also show her manipulating the emotions of a young boy who is just 11 or 12. Now, this is an exchange from September 3rd, 2022. Cranick writes, quote, "Bro, remember, we're going because we needed to talk about something important that affects you too. You said yesterday, but that didn't work out. We don't have to go for long. I want to see the hair too." Now, the boy responds that he can't. And then Cranick says, quote, "I'm confused. We make plans and always have fun. Then IDK, what happens? I need to talk." The boy then says he has to wake up early, and Cranick continues to push back, saying it's the weekend, and she says that she needs to tell the boy something. Quote, "Can you please once so I can tell you this? You need to know." The minor victim says, "No, tell me now if it's so important." And Cranick says, "I told you there's some things you can only talk to people about in person. I don't want to type it. It's private and I don't want it in writing." The boy says he's not going again, and Cranick says, quote, "I really need to just have some fun and talk." Now, you can see Cranick trying here to guilt this boy into going out in the middle of the night once again, where at this point he had been allegedly sexually assaulted by this woman already. Days later, after those messages, Cranick again tries to meet this boy. This time, she allegedly has presents for him. This is what she allegedly said September 9th, 2022. Cranick, "The stuff I ordered for you so far came. We are hanging out either tonight or tomorrow. Your pick." And minor victim says, "No, we aren't hanging out. I can't physically and mentally." Cranick then allegedly says, "I have your other presents that finally came." And the minor victim says, "No." Cranick then says, "I told you, it's one time." "No," says the minor victim. Cranick says, "I have to give them to you, and that's the only time." The minor victim then says, "No," and no means no. Now, the boy had an injury from a soccer match, he said. And then Cranick goes on to say, "I get you, but it's hanging out, that's all. And it can be quick, so I can give you your stuff. I don't get it." Now, the minor victim then says, "I can barely walk." And you can just see him not wanting this whatsoever, but Cranick doesn't stop, according to these court documents. She says, "Did you get hurt or just sore? I figured tomorrow was better anyhow because you'd be sore. Plus, we are probably staying at the fair for a long time too." Now, police say that Cranick continued to message this boy to meet up multiple times through the next month, but that boy never responded. Now, eventually, the boy's parents brought this information to police, and police interviewed Cranick. Cranick, according to these court records, told police that the victim is her daughter's ex-boyfriend. She told police that she bought the minor soda and candy, and that she talked with the boy on social media, but she denied at that point having any sort of sexual contact with the boy. When police pressed her on that, though, she claimed that it was actually the boy who attempted to kiss her in the past, blaming her alleged victim for crossing the line. Now, Cranick told police that the only times that she was alone with the boy was when she would pick him up for him to go on dates with her daughter. Now, Cranick was arrested in November of 2023 in Connecticut, and the next year, in July 2024, she was hit with federal charges. The federal case stems from the online activity that she had with the boy. In state court, she's facing 2 counts of first-degree sexual assault and 2 counts of risk of injury to a minor. Cranick has been in custody since her arrest in 2023, and it appears she's going to be behind bars for much longer because this week she pleaded guilty in federal court to coercion and enticement of a minor to engage in sexual activity. She is set to be sentenced in that case in February of next year, and she faces a mandatory minimum term of 10 years in prison and a maximum term of life in prison. Her state case is still active per Connecticut court records. Her state case is slated to next appear in court on December 19th. Joining me now to talk more about this case is former sex crimes prosecutor Dan Shore. Dan, thank you as always for being with us on Law and Crime. In the criminal complaint, there's just so much to unpack when you read these messages that Alyson Cranick allegedly sent this young boy who was just 11 when all of this started. But the big development this week in this case is that she has pleaded guilty to this coercion charge in federal court. She's still facing state charges, it seems. Why would the federal government get involved in this case?
Well, one reason may be the communications between them, that there were 4,700 messages over Discord, and they might have seen that as the electronic communication falling under federal jurisdiction. There's the FBI Child Exploitation Task Force that looks into this specific type of conduct, and this clearly falls within that. There's ongoing electronic messaging between them and you mentioned how the charge is coercion that she was pleading guilty to. She was really, in the literal meaning of the word, coercing him to meet her, to engage in sexual activity with her. We see that in the language where he doesn't always want to meet her. He doesn't want to engage in sexual activity, and she's telling this 11-year-old, just an 11-year-old, and she's in her 40s, that he should continue to leave his house, sneak out, have sexual interactions with her, and it's really extremely disturbing.
It really is, because you go through these messages, and there were 4,700 between them. In this case, allegedly goes back to 2022. And it's just shocking where, and to me, it just it sounds dramatic, but I don't think it is, to say it was like this mental warfare that she's just waging on this 11-year-old because, when he starts to say he doesn't want to do this and he realizes that it's wrong, she just keeps coming at him. Like, what did you make of these messages and just the tactics that she used to try to get him to continue to meet up with her?
It's really stark and clear that this is a boy. First of all, he's 11, so he's well below the age of consent. It's not even a close call about whether he's at the age of consent. He's 11 years old, and she is having actual sexual intercourse with him. She is having him sneak out of his home to meet her. And as you said in those messages, he is saying at times, "I don't want to meet with you." And she is saying, "No, you need to." He even says the exact words, "No means no," like very literally. And if that was a fictional story where an 11-year-old said that, I would say, well, that's not realistic. An 11-year-old's not going to be able to formulate so clearly that kind of sentiment. But he did. It's in the Discord messages that he said no means no. He's telling her, "I don't want to see you." And she's trying to guilt him. She's also using the carrot of buying him gifts, promising him gifts, and saying how she's going to take care of him, all sorts of things. So the manipulation here, in addition to the sexual misconduct, is really clear in these messages. And we've talked in other discussions we've had about how now so much of sexual misconduct, especially with minors, is captured in messages like this in a way that years ago, before modern technology, we never would have seen. And technology gives us great opportunities in life to connect with people. It also gives people really dangerous weapons to prey on younger people who are vulnerable, manipulate them, and get them to engage in unlawful sexual activity.
And on that point, because the 2 platforms that are talked about that they seem to communicate on, you have Discord and Snapchat. And when I think of those 2 in particular, I think of young people. Like, that's where, Gen Z and younger Like they're on Snapchat. Discord is for kids who are playing video games. Not that adults can't be on that platform, but for
Right.
this 44-year-old like wife and mom it just seems like in so many of these cases that you have these people who just don't really fit the demographic of the majority of people on these apps, and they just use it to go at kids.
Absolutely. Most of the work that I do is investigating sexual misconduct with college students, and they're always messaging each other in the cases I have on Snapchat and Discord. I see that all the time. That is the way they're communicating. And in Snapchat in particular, the messages go away. It's very hard to preserve them without the other person knowing about it. So usually when someone who's older who's doing that in their 40s, there's an unusual reason for it because most people that age are not communicating over Snapchat. But if they are doing something that they know should not be uncovered, that they want to keep secret, they may use Snapchat here. And Discord also, although it's preserved, is kind of not the mainstream way of communicating for someone that age. So clearly there was some recognition on the part of this defendant that what they were doing was wrong, but not enough recognition to either stop doing it or stop communicating about it in a way that law enforcement was able to capture those messages and use that in the prosecution.
Well, and going to some of the tactics she was using, she had said that she was going to buy this kid according to the court documents, like an airsoft gun. And then you see where he reaches the point where he just like wants nothing to do with her anymore. And to me, that seems like very emotional, some strong, emotional strength for an 11-year-old to just say, like, I do not want this person who even worked at his school, allegedly at one point, like this authority figure, like he's just trying to get away. And she's using these tactics of like, well, I have to give you something. It has to be in person. I have to do this. Like, what did you make of that part of it? And just how it seems like she escalated every single tactic in the book to try to get this boy to continue what she had allegedly been forcing him to do.
Right, and that's a standard thing we see in a lot of these cases when there's grooming behavior, that there's gifts to entice someone to have, sometimes it's not just all about sexual activity, sometimes it's just to connect on a personal level, and then that's used as grooming to then lead to more sexual activity. And as you mentioned, she offered to buy gifts for this boy, and he even says at one point in the messages that he can't accept it because how would he explain it to his parents or whoever he's living with that he suddenly got this gift. So then she, according to the messages, it seems like she gave him cash instead of the gift. So there's a lot of thought that she's going through so this is very calculated. This isn't something that she, had an error in judgment one day. This is very calculated, thoughtful, procuring gifts, ongoing messaging, trying to manipulate him. And I think that makes this even more egregious. Sexual activity with an 11-year-old obviously by itself is extremely egregious, but the fact that this is ongoing, she continues to do it, and she's planning this out in order to make it continue, that makes it even more upsetting to read about and to know that this 11-year-old boy went through this, and that's going to impact him for the rest of his life, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the impact because especially being at 11, having gone through all of this, at an age where a lot of kids aren't even thinking about sex yet. He's pre-puberty,
Right.
potentially at this point, right? And so, and she also gave him between $300 and $500, which for an 11-year-old is an incredible amount of money. The friendship bracelet part, to create an acronym that says something along the lines of like friends with benefits, and then it's also like their little secret of what it means. As someone who's prosecuted predators before, beyond the shock value that she would actually do that, according to these court documents, like what is in the beneath the tactic there of creating this bracelet to have this boy wear that would mean something that only she and him would understand?
Well, I think it's part of the isolation to say, we have a special relationship and it's a secret. So and they were working out in those messages what the correct acronym would be that other people wouldn't know. And as you said, it ended up being something like best friends forever with benefits. Benefits obviously implying the sexual interactions between them. The fact that it's this ongoing best friends forever type of sentiment means that she's trying to convince him, hey, this isn't just a short-term thing. This is a lifelong connection we have. So I think that's also part of the grooming and manipulation to say we have this special connection. And remember, she's in her 40s, he's 11. And at 11 years old, 11-year-olds are starting to hear things about sex. They're curious. That's when sex education is important, to start teaching people about healthy relationships so they understand what proper healthy sexual relationships may be, but they're not generally engaging in that kind of activity. Then if they are, that's highly problematic for any 11-year-old, but even worse when it's with a 44-year-old who is someone who is going to be this boy's introduction to relationships and sex. And hopefully he gets the support he needs to get past that, but that's something that's going to scar him as he's going forward in his life, and hopefully in the future developing real healthy relationships, not manipulative ones, with someone who's over 30 years older when he's 11 and should not be engaging in sexual activity at that point.
Another shocking part of this, and there's a lot, is that the victim allegedly was the ex-boyfriend of her daughter, and that I guess he broke up with her daughter, and then she wanted to like have a private conversation, and that might be where like some of this began. And there was a recent story in Illinois that had like a similar background of a mom of a child then allegedly sexually abuses the ex-boyfriend, and like we're talking young kids here. I mean, how common is it to see that dynamic play out in these types of cases?
That's not something that I've seen often in cases. A lot of the other elements we've talked about here, the grooming, the manipulation, the gifts, the older person trying to keep it a secret and say we have a special relationship, that's something that we see a lot as a pattern. But to actually go after someone who knew this defendant's daughter, it just makes it even more disturbing. And the fact that he is, in this situation where he's emotionally manipulated, physically manipulated, financially manipulated, there's just all sorts of dangerous manipulation that's going on for a long period of time. This isn't just a short-term thing. So I think that particular aspect of it is unusual, but it just adds to how problematic this is, to say the least.
Yeah, and now that she's pleaded guilty to this charge, she'll be sentenced next year, and that charge in federal custody could be 10 to life. So a major thing that she's pleaded guilty to. But then she also faces 2 counts of first-degree sexual assault, as well as 2 other charges in Connecticut State Court. How does that work out now, where she could get a sentence in the federal system that could put her in jail or prison for the rest of her life if they gave her the max? But then at the same time, she's also facing 4 counts in state court, where she also could receive some very serious prison time.
Right, so she could be prosecuted in state court, and because of all the evidence we've just talked about, that you have this boy, all the things he said, that these messages show everything that we've just talked about, so it's really hard to see how she could not be convicted. She's innocent until proven guilty in state court, obviously, but you have this documentation of what she was doing. So I think a big question ultimately, once she's sentenced in federal court and possibly convicted in state court, is whether those 2 sentences run consecutively, which means you have to serve one and then the other, or whether there's concurrent time, which means she serves both sentences together. Either way, you're looking at significant state prison time or federal prison time for her. And she's 44, so she's going to be pretty advanced in her age by the time she gets out of prison if she's sentenced as we expect.
And, I think of this victim as well, and he's alleged in Connecticut State Court. She's pleaded guilty to this charge in federal court. But for this victim, I think a lot of people would say that boy is going to be scarred based off of what prosecutors say happened. What does that scarring, though, what does that actually look like for someone so young that has been through something like this?
Yeah, and in my work, I've talked to a lot of people who are adults who look back on their sexual experiences when they're younger that were non-consensual because of their age, that they were sexually abused. And it unfortunately frames people's view of relationships and sex for the rest of their lives. I think so much of someone's introduction to sexual activity kind of builds their attitudes towards other people throughout their life. And to have your introduction to relationships and sex be as an 11-year-old with a manipulative 44-year-old engaging in sexual activity, forcing you to sneak out of your house, buying you gifts, it's going to take a lot of support and therapy for someone to then be able to get past that and understand what a healthy relationship looks like. Because most people, when they look at their own personal relationships and build them, they're doing it based on what they learned as a child. Now, usually that childhood education is based on how people see other people modeling relationships, either parents or friends or something like that, or older siblings. But this 11-year-old boy, is experiencing this really horrific introduction at a young age, and that may frame their understanding of these issues, and that is tragic. Hopefully he gets support and counseling to get past that.
Absolutely. And, this case was just, we talk about a lot of shocking cases, but just seeing the tactics that she allegedly used in these messages to try and manipulate this boy into alleged sexual abuse is just so haunting. I know this is a world, Dan, in your work that you know well, and it's important work that you do. And I also know you write about this. Your book, Open Bar, is out right now. What do people need to know about that book, where they can find it?
Sure. So Open Bar came out this summer. It's a fictional account based on my real life experiences as a sexual misconduct investigator at schools, and it's about a high profile sexual misconduct scandal. It's a fast moving political thriller. People could look that up, and they can follow more about the fiction writing side of the work I do on Substack if you search for my name.
All right, great stuff. As always, former sex crimes prosecutor Dan Shore, thank you for talking through these cases with us. We appreciate it. You're a long
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.